Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I am here with another book haul. It is library book sale season and I went to the first of those last month with Marissa at Blatantly Bookish and we had a lovely time and we were very successful. So I'm here to show you all of the books that I picked up there. First of all, I have two other extraneous purchases that are separate from that book haul. The first is this gorgeous necklace from LitJoy, which I am so happy to have. This is a Jane Eyre necklace. We have this lovely bird here. Then it has the Jane Eyre quote about "I am no bird and no net ensnares me." I just had to have it. Secondly, I did purchase one book at the new Barnes & Noble in town, and that was The Tale of Princess Fatima, Warrior Woman, otherwise known as the Arabic epic of al-himma. And I think this sounds incredible. I had actually forgotten about it until I discovered that Penguin had republished it in this beautiful edition. So of course I had to pick it up. I'm hoping to actually read it next month. So I'm very, very excited about this. Then we get to the book sale itself. And let this be a plug for book sales if you are looking for books to add to your collection, but you're on a bit of a budget, hit library book sales. I got all of the following books for around $23. The first that I had to pick up is not actually a book. It is the 1995 Persuasion on DVD, because believe it or not, I have not seen this particular version. I saw the 2007 adaptation and thought it was good. I have seen bits of this adaptation, and I wish I hadn't seen the 2022 Netflix adaptation, but I have not seen this in full, so now I finally can. Then I picked up a couple of children's books. First of all, I found two American Girl books that I have not read because these American Girls were introduced after I kind of passed the age of reading American Girl. But I am very intrigued to read their stories now, especially because they changed the book formats recently, and I don't think they're as good. So I'm trying to track down as many of these older editions as I can. So the first one I picked up was Meet Caroline, which takes place, I think, during the War of 1812. Yes, and she lives near Lake Ontario. And then we have Meet Marie Grace, which I think takes place in the 1850s in New Orleans. Yes, so I'm very excited to pick these up. And lastly, I found this picture book, Egbert the Slightly Cracked Egg by Tom Ross and Rex Barron, which I remember reading all the time as a child when I borrowed it from the library. I couldn't tell you much about the plot at this point, except that Egbert is a slightly cracked egg and all the other food in the refrigerator kind of rejects him because he's different, he's weird, and so he sets out on his own to find his own place in the world. In other miscellaneous books, I also found this book of arias for a mezzo-soprano, which I am. I have had this marked on an Amazon wish list for years, so I was thrilled to find this for such a marked down price. And it's exactly what it says, a lot of arias that would be suitable for a mezzo-soprano, such as these. Now some of these I have done already in voice lessons or I have in full-on opera scores, but I'm thrilled to be able to look through the rest and find others that might also suit me. And finally, I also found this book about the story and the creation of Riverdance, written by Sam Smith or Smythe. I'm never sure how people who spell Smith with a Y want it pronounced. But as some of you may know, I was an Irish dancer. Riverdance was my absolute life from the time I was 5 years old. And so I'm thrilled to have this book to add to my collection. Then we get into the novels, which are mostly either classics or nonfiction, with some exceptions as well. Firstly, I found a copy of A Pair of Blue Eyes by Thomas Hardy, which I have not read, but I remember my Hardy professor referencing all the time, so I'm thrilled to have this to get around to. I'm also always on the lookout for other copies of L.M. Montgomery books, namely the Emily series or, say, the Story Girl and other standalones. So I found Emily's Quest, which is the third in the Emily of New Moon series. I would love to get the other two so I can read them all the way through. I remember reading Emily of New Moon when I was 12, but I remember nothing about the plot now, so I would like to reread that one and then go through the next two. And I also found this edition of Hard Times by Charles Dickens, which is yet another Dickens that I have not read yet. For a lot of these classics, I won't be summarizing what they're about because, quite honestly, I'm not sure what they're about and I kind of want to go in blind. And I'm afraid to read the backs because sometimes the backs will spoil the endings. I also found this copy of The Beggar's Opera by John Gay, which I hear referenced all the time, especially when I was in university. So I'm really pleased to have this. And I love these editions because they have sketches of all of the characters as well, and it really helps with characterization. I have The Beau Stratagem in this edition as well. It was done by Barron's Educational Series. I also found two new to me Antony Trollops. Marissa and I agonized over all of the Trollops that we found, but I decided on these two. The first was Rachel Ray, and the next was Castle Richmond. I also found this gorgeous edition of The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James, further adding to my collection of Henry James novels when I have read none of them so far, except for Turn of the Screw, which I don't count because it is the furthest from his usual style. I also found this fabulous edition of Ordeal by Innocence by Agatha Christie, which is another of her standalone mysteries, and it reminded me that once I have finished reading it, we can watch the series on, here in the US, Amazon Prime. Then I found some general fiction books, the first of which was The Weight of Ink by Rachel Kaddish, which was recommended to me by one of you, actually, a few days before I went to the sale. And when I saw it there, and having heard about it in such close succession, I thought, this is a sign. I need to pick this up. I'm having trouble getting my thoughts in order today, so I'm going to read you the blurb to tell you what this is about. Set in the London of the 1660s and of the early 2000s, The Weight of Ink is the interwoven tale of two women of remarkable intellect. Esther Velasquez, an emigrant from Amsterdam who is permitted to scribe for a blind rabbi just before the plague hits the city, and Helen Watt, an ailing historian with a love of Jewish history. When Helen is summoned by a former student to view a cache of newly discovered 17th century Jewish documents, she enlists the help of Aaron Levy, an American graduate student as impatient as he is charming, and embarks on one last project, to determine the identity of the document's scribe, the elusive Aleph. And that does sound wonderful. I can't guarantee when I will get to it because it is significantly chunkier than I thought it was going to be, but I do want to read that eventually. I also found I Am Madame X by Gioia Di Liberto, which I found fascinating because I've heard of Madame X actually in a documentary series about historical makeup. And Madame X and this painting of her was used to illustrate the fashion of enameling that became popular among certain people in the late Victorian era, which was a sort of permanent makeup. It was considered very déclassé, but people were also really fascinated by people who had it done, and Madame X was one of them. Oh, and the back gives me more information about her, so I will read that to you. When John Singer Sargent unveiled Madame X, his famous portrait of American beauty Virginie Gautreau, at the 1884 Paris Salon, its subject's bold pose and provocative dress shocked the public and the critics, smashing Sargent's dreams of a Paris career. In this remarkable novel, Gioia Di Liberto tells Virginie's story, drawing on the sketchy historical facts to recreate Virginie's tempestuous personality and the captivating milieu of 19th century Paris. So it tracks her from her start in New Orleans, and her traveling to France to escape the Civil War, and eventually becoming the center of Parisian gossip during the Belle Époque. This sounds great. I also found Catherine by Anya Seton, which is her fictionalized account of Catherine Swynford, who was mistress and I think the last wife of John of Gaunt. And it's her and their children that is partly responsible for the whole mess leading up to the War of the Roses, and so many different people contending for the English throne. I know my mother spent years trying to untangle that through various non-fiction books, so I'm intrigued to see what this fiction book will do with that story. I also found another short story collection of Alice Walker's called The Way Forward is with a Broken Heart. I loved the color purple. I liked her last short story collection that I read, whose name escapes me at the moment, but I'm intrigued to try this one to see if I like it any better. And since it is a short story collection, I can't tell you very much about it. Then I have a couple of nonfiction books, at least I think they're nonfiction. The first is called The Book Shopper by Murray Brown, and this is a series of essays, I think, that Murray Brown has written about book lovers, book shoppers, bookstores. Actually, it says here, he writes about bookstores, online booksellers, and the off-center kind of people who inhabit them. And it says, in such chapters as book lovers are not necessarily people lovers, prerequisites, what every good bookstore should have, books as gifts, and the classic book group, Murray Brown offers a lifeline to readers who love to browse for books and are always looking for that next great read, and a good deal, but who may be swamped by the vast offerings. That sounds delightful. I also found Tolstoy and the Purple Chair by Nina Sankovic, which I think was one of Olive's favorite books of last year, maybe the year before. Selfishly, on the surface, I picked this up because I do enjoy Tolstoy as a writer, and purple is my favorite color. But this is really Nina's story. When she was grieving after the death of her sister, she decided to stop everything and read a book a day. And this chronicles that journey and how it helped her through everything that she was dealing with. I also found a copy of How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell, whose subtitle is Resisting the Attention Economy. I remember hearing about this tons on BookTube a few years ago, and I think I really need it now. I think its premise is how to break our dependency on screens and apps that are designed to grab at your attention, and how to let your brain settle back to its normal self to allow normal functioning, better mental health, better creativity. Now, I won't be giving it up entirely because I do need to be on a screen a lot for work, and indeed one of my hobbies is now on social media, but I do need to look for ways to decrease my dependency on a variety of apps. So this could be interesting and useful. And lastly, I picked up The Making of Victorian Values by Ben Wilson, which tracks the period from 1789 to 1837, and all of the events that led to the incredibly uptight, moralistic Victorians when the Regency and Georgian eras had been much looser and much more laissez-faire in comparison. And this tracks that short period of time where that changeover starts to happen. It is quite chunky. I don't know when I'll get to it, but it sounds wonderful and I couldn't just leave it there. And there you have all of the books that I picked up at this first of the summer book sales. I am looking at going to another one in about 3 weeks, so there will definitely be another book haul sometime in September, probably late September, early October, so be on the lookout for that. If you have read any of these books and highly recommend them, let me know. If you have questions or other books that you think I would like based on these books, also let me know. And until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.